This feeling, this sudden, violent interruption of a timeline, is the devastating prologue to a story no one ever wants to tell. It's a story about the void left behind when a loved one is stolen, not by fate or accident, but by an unseen hand. For some families, that void is filled with questions that have no answers, and a search for justice that becomes a lifelong, agonizing obsession. Let's talk about the case that America has never been able to forget. It didn't happen in a dark alley. It happened in the lap of luxury. The story of JonBenet Ramsey began in the affluent community of Boulder, Colorado, a place of picturesque landscapes, expensive real estate, and quiet suburban safety. Here lived the Ramsey family. John, a multimillionaire businessman, Patsy, a former Miss West Virginia, their son Burke, and their 6-year-old daughter, JonBenet. JonBenet wasn't just a child. She was a presence. She was vibrant, charismatic, and known for her bright smile that seemed to light up the stage in the world of child beauty pageants. Photos of her in elaborate costumes, with perfectly coiffed blonde curls and a dazzling grin, would soon be plastered across every television screen and newspaper in the world. But before she became a symbol of a national obsession, she was simply a little girl who loved her family, a first grader vibrating with excitement for Santa Claus. She had a life of promise, a future that seemed as bright and boundless as any child's could be. That future was stolen on Christmas night, 1996. The morning of December 26th didn't begin with the tearing of wrapping paper or the smell of pancakes. It began with a mother's frantic, guttural terror. Patsy Ramsey dialed 911 at 5:52 a.m., screaming that her daughter was missing. She told the dispatcher she had found a ransom note on the back staircase of their sprawling Tudor home. But this wasn't just any note. It was bizarrely long, 2.5 pages, written on a notepad from inside the house, using a pen found inside the house. It demanded a very specific, odd sum: $118,000. Not $1 million, not $500,000, but an amount that almost exactly matched John Ramsey's Christmas bonus. What followed was a chaotic and deeply flawed initial investigation that effectively doomed the case from hour one. Police arrived, but the sprawling Ramsey house was not immediately locked down as a crime scene. Friends and family came and went, offering support, touching surfaces, and inadvertently contaminating potential evidence. For hours, the police operated under the assumption that this was a kidnapping. They thought JonBenet was gone, taken away. Then, hours into the investigation, a detective made a suggestion that seems baffling in hindsight. He asked John Ramsey to search the house one more time. John went to the basement, a place that had been overlooked in the initial sweep. There, in a small, windowless room used as a wine cellar, he made a horrific discovery that changed everything. His 6-year-old daughter's body was found wrapped in her own white blanket. Her mouth was covered with heavy duct tape, and a nylon cord was tied tightly around her neck, attached to a broken paintbrush handle to form a crude, tightening garrote. She hadn't been kidnapped. She had been bludgeoned and strangled to death in her own home. The discovery shifted the entire investigation from a rescue mission to a murder inquiry. The scene was a paradox. There were no clear signs of forced entry into the house. No smashed doors, no picked locks. The ransom note, with its movie villain dialogue, seemed staged. Suspicion almost immediately fell inward onto the parents, John and Patsy, and even their 9-year-old son, Burke. The media frenzy that erupted was unlike anything seen before. The Ramseys, in their raw grief, were thrust under an intense and often accusatory public spotlight. They were portrayed not as victims, but as guilty parties hiding a dark secret. Every move they made was analyzed, their history in the pageant world scrutinized as if it were a motive for murder. But the evidence was far from clear. The Boulder Police Department faced widespread criticism for their handling of the case, from the initial contamination of the crime scene to their perceived tunnel vision on the family. And then, a key piece of science emerged that pointed away from the Ramseys: the discovery of DNA. Genetic material from an unidentified male was found mixed with blood in JonBenet's underwear. This wasn't family DNA. This suggested an intruder, a phantom, was present that night. Over the years, two main camps of theory have emerged. One, championed by the legendary retired detective Lou Smit, is the intruder theory. Smit argued that an outsider entered the home, possibly through a broken basement window where a suitcase was found positioned as a step, and committed this heinous act. The other major theory is that the call is coming from inside the house, that someone in the family was responsible, either intentionally or accidentally, and the kidnapping was a frantic, clumsy staging to cover it up. For years, the case went cold. The Ramseys were officially cleared by prosecutors in 2008 based on that ghost-touch DNA evidence. But in the court of public opinion, suspicion lingered like a bad fog. Patsy Ramsey died of ovarian cancer in 2006 without ever seeing justice for her daughter. Yet the fight for answers hasn't stopped. In late 2024 and 2020, the case saw renewed momentum. Following recommendations from a Colorado cold case review team, Boulder police confirmed that dozens of items from the crime scene were being sent to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation for new, cutting-edge DNA testing. John Ramsey has been a vocal advocate for using advanced genetic genealogy, the same tech that caught the Golden State Killer, to analyze the small, mixed DNA samples that have long challenged investigators. While some experts caution the technology might not yet be advanced enough for such degraded evidence, there is renewed hope. The case of John Benet Ramsey is no longer sitting on a dusty shelf. It's an active investigation once more, a slow march toward a truth that has been buried for nearly 3 decades. Now we have to go back. Long before 24-hour news cycles, Reddit sleuths and DNA forensics, a crime so shockingly brutal unfolded in the heart of America that it left a permanent scar on the national psyche. It happened in the small, peaceful town of Villisca, Iowa, a place where doors were left unlocked and neighbors knew each other's schedules. On the morning of June 10th, 19th, that sense of security was shattered forever. The Moore family was the picture of American success. Josiah and Sarah Moore were raising 4 children: Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul. On the evening of June 9th, the family attended a Children's Day church program. It was a wholesome night. 2 young friends of the Moore children, Lena and Ina Stillinger, were invited to stay the night. The next morning, a neighbor noticed the Moore house was unusually still. No chores were being done. No children were playing. Concerned, she eventually called Josiah's brother Ross. What he discovered inside would plunge the town into a nightmare. All 8 people in the house, Josiah, Sarah, their 4 children, and the 2 Stillinger sisters, had been bludgeoned to death with an axe as they slept. The victims ranged from 43-year-old Josiah to 5-year-old Paul. The violence was absolute, but it was the behavior of the killer after the violence that makes your blood run cold. The killer had taken the time to cover the faces of each victim with bedclothes. Even more chilling, they draped cloths over all the mirrors and glass in the house. Why? Was it shame? Superstition? A fear of seeing their own reflection in the carnage? A bloodied axe belonging to Josiah was left at the scene, and a bowl of bloody water was found in the kitchen, as if the killer had calmly washed their hands before slipping away into the pre-dawn darkness. The investigation was a product of its time, which is to say it was a disaster. Before the scene could be secured, dozens of townspeople traipsed through the house to gawk at the bodies, contaminating what little evidence there might have been. Souvenir hunters even chipped away pieces of the blood-stained woodwork. With no forensic technology, investigators relied on little more than eyewitness accounts, rumors, and instinct. Suspects ranged from a powerful state senator, Frank F. Jones, who was Josiah's business rival, to a peculiar traveling minister named Reverend Lynn George Jacqueline Kelly, who had a history of sexual deviance and even confessed at one point before being acquitted. But the most compelling theory to emerge in recent years comes from the book The Man from the Train. Authors Bill James and Rachel McCarthy James connect Villisca to a string of similar axe murders across the country between 1898 and 1912. These crimes shared a distinct, terrifying pattern. A family murdered in their sleep with the blunt end of an axe, the covering of victims' faces, the veiling of mirrors, and a location always within walking distance of a train depot. They identify a German immigrant named Paul Mueller as a likely suspect. A serial killer who used the rails to drift from town to town, slaughtering families and vanishing on the next steam engine before the bodies were even found. But with no confession, no conviction, and no definitive proof, the Villisca Axe murders remain officially unsolved. The house on 508 East 2nd Street still stands, a monument to a century-old mystery, a place where the silence of a summer night in 1912 was broken by unimaginable violence. Finally, we move to the era of the counterculture, where a shadow fell over Northern California. This wasn't random brutality, it was deliberate psychological warfare. The killer didn't just want to take lives, he wanted to create a legend. He gave himself a name, a symbol, and a costume. For years, he played a twisted game with the police and the press, a game that has never truly ended. He called himself the Zodiac. The Zodiac Killer is officially linked to at least 5 murders between December 1968 and October 1969, though in his letters, he claimed as many as 37. His terror began on December 20th, 1968. On a desolate Lover's Lane road near Vallejo, high school students David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were on a first date. They were shot and killed in the cold night air. Months later, on July 4th, 1969, Darlene Ferrin was killed, and her companion, Mike Mageau, was wounded in another attack. Mageau survived, providing the first description of the attacker. Less than an hour later, the Vallejo police received a phone call. A calm, monotone voice said, "I want to report a double murder." He took credit for the attack that just happened, and the one from the year before. He was taunting them. This was the start of the Zodiac's public campaign of terror. In August 1969, 3 major newspapers received letters containing details only the killer could know. Each letter also contained 1/3 of a cryptogram, a cipher of symbols and letters, which, he claimed, held his identity. He demanded they publish the ciphers on the front page, or he'd go on a kill rampage. The letters began with the now infamous salutation. "This is the Zodiac speaking." The 408 cipher was cracked within a week by a high school teacher and his wife. It didn't reveal a name, but a misspelled, chilling rant into the mind of a psychopath. "I like killing people because it is so much fun." The attacks continued. In September, he stabbed a young couple at Lake Berryessa, this time wearing a bizarre executioner-style hood with his crosshair symbol on the chest. 2 weeks later, he shot and killed a San Francisco cab driver, Paul Stein, in the upscale neighborhood of Presidio Heights. To prove he did it, he mailed a piece of Stein's bloodied shirt to the San Francisco Chronicle. He was mocking the entire system. For years, the Zodiac sent taunting letters and more ciphers, some of which remain unsolved. The investigation was massive. Thousands of suspects were considered. The most prominent was Arthur Lee Allen, a former school teacher who wore a Zodiac brand watch and owned the same type of boots found at a crime scene. But the evidence was circumstantial. His DNA and handwriting didn't match the letters. More recently, independent investigators named Gary Francis Post as a suspect, claiming to have matched scars on his forehead to a police sketch. But law enforcement has not confirmed this link. Decades passed, the trail went cold, but the puzzle remained. In 2020, more than 50 years after it was sent to the press, the complex 340 cipher was finally cracked by a team of private citizens using supercomputers. Its message was another taunt from the grave. "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber, because it will send me to paradise all the sooner." As of 2025, the case officially remains unsolved. While investigators have explored using genetic genealogy on the saliva from the envelopes, it remains a hope for the future, rather than a confirmed breakthrough. The Zodiac Killer created a persona that has outlived him, a ghost in a machine of his own making.